Good evening. Welcome to Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime with Eric O'Neill. I'm Amanda Olkey, Director of Adult Education here at the International Spy Museum. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, we are thrilled to host our favorite former FBI spy hunter for the launch of his new book, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. It's a great-looking book. And I can tell you, Eric is very passionate about the subject matter of the book, and he spells it out very clearly in the subtitle, Cybersecurity Tactics to Outsmart Hackers and Disarm Scammers. And he's been talking a lot about this book for a while, so it is really wonderful to be able to launch it here at the Spy Museum, because Eric is a great friend of the museum, and he is featured in our main exhibition. And if you're really lucky, you may have joined us for one of his spectacular surveillance programs, which we do in the streets of DC. Really, it's bucket list if you haven't done it, so highly recommend. Now, Eric is going to plunge into some of the subject matter from his book and give you a sense of his FBI background. Now, before I turn it over to Eric, I want to thank Delete Me. They are the wonderful sponsor for this evening's reception. Sorry, folks at home. That's why you should try to always come in person to our programs. Anyway, enough from me. Over to you, Eric O'Neill. Right.
If you've seen me speak in the past, this will be a little bit different. Typically, when I use a keynote, I'm on a lavalier. I never use slides. I pace the stage. But here, I'm going to stand behind the podium like a normal author and speak about my book. Now, what I'm not going to do is read from the book, because you'll all get the book and then you can read it yourself. But I will tell some stories from it. And I really want to start with a little bit about how the book came to be, because I think people are always fascinated by how an author finds their place, finds this story that they spend years toiling over so that you can finally have it in your hands. And for me, this began before the pandemic, as I was on stage speaking and seeing how things were changing in the world, how we were embracing technology in a way that we never had in the past. And then suddenly the pandemic hits. And I know that saying that word is like shouting Voldemort in Harry Potter land. Nobody wants to talk about the pandemic. We've pretended that it never happened in human history. You don't even see movies or TV shows about it. But it did. And what it did is it drove us, it grabbed us by the seat of our pants and threw us kicking and screaming into a world of embracing technology faster than we were ever ready for, and far sooner than cybersecurity was prepared to handle. Suddenly we were all online. And who took advantage of it? Cybercriminals. Cybercrime grew at the most extraordinary pace in human history during the pandemic. And so I thought I'd write a book about it, because here I was dealing with a big cyber attack with an organization that I was working with. And at the same time, I found myself a single dad of a preteen daughter. Now, what happened during the pandemic, this is really ironic, and it's sort of, I still wrap my mind around it, is my lovely, wonderful, incredible wife, who I could not write any of these things if she didn't take care of me. I couldn't fly around the world and do keynotes on stages if she wasn't taking care of the family. We made a decision that she was going to take our two youngest, whose school had decided to just check out on teaching, to Germany, to East Germany, where it was full open. No masks. They were playing in recess. They could run around the neighborhood. There were no lockdowns. So figure that one out, right? They were in East Germany, completely free. And here we were in US, the freest place in the world, locked down. So that was a little bit ironic for me and still boggles my mind a bit. But they did come back. But for those 6 months, I wrote this book and tried to be a single dad. And I have to apologize first and foremost to my daughter, Hannah, because I was spending a lot of time writing a book and dealing with a major cyber attack for an organization and thinking about how the world had changed and we're never going back. It is still almost work hybrid first. There's still a lot of work from home. We're relying on technology more and more, and we are being fooled and scammed at an extraordinary rate because of it. So some thank yous are in order, because how this book came to be. The first book I wrote was a pandemic book about a father who's raising a daughter while in the middle of a cyber attack. And I sent it to my speaker's agent, Ken Sterling, who's here in the audience, one of my very, very close friends. And he looked at it and said, "It's amazing, but I'm not an agent." And I said, "Can you help me find one?" And he sent me to a company called Monaco Associates. And my another good friend, Barbara, is here in the audience representing them. And Carolyn Monaco looked at it, and she's like the book whisperer, right? And she said, "It's great, but I'm still not an agent. You need an agent," and found me one. My agent, Michael Palgon, who couldn't be here, he's in New York. I'll see him next week. And he looked at it and said, "No one wants a pandemic book. Try again." And that's what happens sometimes when you're writing. It's iterative. What you thought was amazing really wasn't going to work, not in publishing. So I did. I went back to the drawing board, and I went way back to the drawing board, all the way back to my days at the FBI Academy, where I was taught counterintelligence, the science of catching spies. And to do that, we would learn the tradecraft of all the bad guys, whether they were a terrorist cell or they were a intelligence officer from China or Russia or Iran or wherever. We would learn how they did what they did so we could counter it. And that's what I wanted to write. And that's what ended up being this book, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, which was not the original title. Once I landed HarperCollins as my publisher, they changed that too. And this is how publishing works. So with all those thank yous, there are two more thank yous that I absolutely have to give to the Spy Museum, who has been my friend for decades now. I have been doing work with the Spy Museum, both in this location and the former location, which was a little easier to get to, just not as nice, for so many years, and especially working with Amanda Olke and all of the fun things. I see people out there that are my graduates of the Surveillance 101 program, and good for you, and I love to see you again and again. My buddy Dan Roddy is here, and we run that program together, so if you want to come back to the Spy and do that, it is a lot of fun. We're doing them around quarterly. I also want to thank Delete Me, who should be here. I'm like looking at the reserve for Delete Me. Oh, there we go. Excellent. Who are kind sponsors of the reception we're all going to go to, which is going to be absolutely in the Spy Museum way, fabulous. If you ever are worried about your information being on the dark web, Delete Me has this phenomenal technology where they can actually go in and remove it from data brokers who are holding it hostage, and will use it for identity theft, use it to fool all your friends and family, and use it to cost you all sorts of mayhem. So really cool company. You should absolutely check them out. But with that, and all those thank yous, I want to tell some stories. And this one starts when I was 15 years old and my house burned down. I was a freshman in high school, and I was abruptly pulled out of class, driven home, and I looked at the wreck of our home just north of Washington, D.C., this old Victorian that was built in 1892. And when I looked at the front of the house, I noticed that the worst burning, the worst part, the worst damage was my bedroom. So this house, right, had been built by obviously a wealthy family, because it had fireplaces in the beginning, and then they innovated, as we do with technology, and built one big fireplace in the basement and then put ducts up to the fireplaces in each room with a big iron plate, and that's how they would heat the rooms. And then they innovated again. And they had boilers and radiators, and they got rid of the fireplaces and turned them into closets and ripped out all the ducts except one. The one that went from the basement where the fire started right into my front room, which is the room my daughter Hannah's in now. The duct's gone. We checked. That fire came up that duct like a fireball and incinerated the room in seconds. If I had been home and not in school, I wouldn't be here today. My family wouldn't be here today. You wouldn't be learning about Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. I would be gone. But I wasn't, which is really fortunate for me. But unfortunately, I own nothing that since before I was 15 years old. It was completely gone in a moment. And this is how it can feel to be in the center of a cyber attack, where you feel like the world is burning down around you, and you have very few options. And you're angry at the fact that someone, a cyber spy, a cyber criminal, has stolen your information, has ransomed it away from you, is exploiting you with it. and it can feel completely and utterly ruthless. Well, not too long after that, about another decade or so, a decade and a year or so, I was in the middle of another fire, undercover in the FBI, at FBI headquarters, in the most unique case the FBI had ever run to catch a guy named Robert Hansen, who turned out to be the most damaging spy in U.S. history. I didn't know that going into the case. I figured that out as we were going along. And sitting in front of him on day one of this undercover investigation where I was told, you got to catch him. And I tried my best to have a conversation with him. I remember my wife saying, Juliana said, well, why don't you ask him about the Redskins? You know, you're always talking about them. They're not even the Redskins anymore, right? They're the Commanders, but that wouldn't have made sense back then. And I looked at him and I said, how about the team? And, it's looking good this year. They were pretty bad last year. And he looked at me and he said, football is a barbaric sport. The only people who are dumber than the people who play it are the people who watch it. And I knew we weren't going to get along. But he had mercy on me, and he finally stopped my bumbling attempts to have a conversation with him. And he said, I want to tell you about Hansen's Law. And I looked at him and I said, Hansen's Law? And I started the little recorder in my head for the analyst. This sounds good. All right. What's Hansen's Law? Dude named a law about himself. This has to be good. He said, Hansen's Law is this. The spy is in the worst possible place. The spy is that person with access to the information that will do the most damage and the knowledge and the wherewithal to get it into the hands of those who will pay him the most for it. And that, Eric, is what we were here in the FBI to defend against. And I'm not sure to this day whether he was challenging me or just trying to throw me off or really trying to sound professorial, maybe all three. But he was right. The spy is in the worst possible place. And in cybercrime, that criminal is in the worst possible place for all of us, where your data is. Because that is what they're after. They don't care who you are. They don't care how important you are. They don't care how special you think you are or what you're doing, whether you're making the widget for the next Joint Strike Fighter or you're just a grandma who is enjoying her retirement. They only care whether you are vulnerable, and they will come after you as ruthlessly as that fire took everything I owned before I was 15. So now I'm going to embarrass myself a little, because why not? I'm on stage, this is my time, and I'm going to tell a story. And this story takes place from an email. Now, when I say email, I want you all to hear the dun, 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 right? Because emails are still the number one way that these attackers are coming after us. I got an email from the pastor of the Hillsong Church in Cape Town, South Africa. I say it like that because this is an immensely incredible church. It seats about 10,000 people, and they were inviting me to come speak. Now, I'm a public speaker. I do this all the time. And by the way, Big Speak, this is before I went exclusive with you. Then there's a real reason that I am now with a speaker's agency, because criminals prey on speakers. I know this is a little foreshadowing, but I'm an author. I've never been to Cape Town. Does that tell you what's about to happen? I got this amazing offer. It was a full speaker fee, plus they said we're going to fly you first class in the pod. And I'm real excited, right? I'm going to lay down and sleep on my way to Cape Town. And I've always wanted to go to Cape Town. It's on my bucket list. And so we got this letter of intent. We negotiated a contract, and I signed it. And then I got my confirmation for my hotel room. And then they said, buy your ticket. The event's right around the corner, and we really want to make sure you're going to be here. We'll reimburse you for the ticket soon. I went on United, and I didn't really feel comfortable, but I bought the $10,000 ticket. Yes, Jill, that's how much it cost. And I bought a $10,000 non-refundable ticket to Cape Town, and that's what they want you to do. Now there was more pressure on me. But there's a psychology called confirmation bias, where when you want something to be true, you make it true. You make it happen. You will talk your way into it. This happens in so many different kinds of scams. Romance fraud, right? Financial fraud, all these different scams. You will find a way to make it true because you want to believe that it's true. And here I was, wanting to believe that I was going to get to Cape Town and speak in front of this immense crowd and get to sleep on the plane on the way there, right? Lying down, which would have been really cool. And then they wanted something weird. They wanted a work permit, a visa, all which had costs attached to it, and a repatriation fee. Now, my cop instinct was going haywire. A repatriation fee? I said, what's that? And they said, well, That's to make sure you don't emigrate to South Africa. I said, I think you got it the wrong way. I'm coming from the US. They're like, no, it's a thing. And they escrow it and pay it back when you go home. I said, all right. And this is sounding a little too fishy even for me. And so I called the embassy. I mean, I am an attorney. I should have thought this. I called the embassy in Washington, D.C. and I said, do you have anything called a repatriation fee and this work permit and visa? She's like, you don't need a visa. You just come in and we stamp. You don't need a work permit. You're just speaking. And we have no such thing as a repatriation fee, dude. I'm like, okay, this is a scam. And then I researched it and I found that this cybercrime group out of Cape Town had been scamming people for years, speakers, primarily speakers, to the tune sometimes of tens of thousands of dollars. People had actually paid them to buy their ticket, thinking it was going to get reimbursed. It was bananas. But these were a group of about 5 cybercriminals who were preying on speakers. At the last minute, I decided not to pay them the thousands of dollars. They were asking me to wire to them in Western Union because time was running short. And I backed away from it. Now, one thing you don't want to do if you are a bunch of cyber criminals is call somebody who has a particular set of skills on your private cell phone. And so I was very easily able to figure out their identities and who they were and their addresses and where they lived and everything about them. I run a company that does that. Did some things that I'm not going to talk about in polite company to all of them until they were begging me to stop, and then turn them over to Cape Town police, and they will never prey on another public speaker again. But there had been public speakers who bought the ticket, showed up at Hillsong, ready to speak in their suit and tie, and they were just like, oh, another one, because this had happened again and again. I called Hillsong and let them know, and told them all about this and that I actually had a really great inspirational keynote, and would they like me to come speak? And I'm still waiting to hear back. Maybe in the future. But the point of this is, if it can happen to me, and I'm trained, it can happen to you. We all have to be prepared against these cyber attacks because you don't want the world to burn down around you, and that's what it can feel like. Now, as for United, I called them and I told them this entire story, just as I told you. And the attendant on the other line of the phone, the agent, she said, "That's such a great story. You know what? I'm just going to reimburse your ticket." So I'm kind of United for life, right? I'm with them. I'm just with them. They saved me $10,000 that I would have been out. I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like fly to Cape Town and then call my wife and say, hey, I'm in Cape Town and I'm not actually getting paid and I spent $10,000 to get here and you didn't get to come with me. That would not have worked over very well. But there's more. There's more. Wait, there's more. It's not just cyber criminals who are using clever email and phone and text schemes. They're also coming after you on social media. And they're using AI. Everybody's using AI. And in fact, parents, when you get my book, because I know you all get my book, you should read chapters 10 and 11 on exploitation with your children. Because cyber criminals are using AI and imposter and confidence scheme attacks to exploit your kids, and it has led to some children committing suicide. I don't want to make this too dark, but I think that there are some very important tips and tricks in there that every parent should read with their kids. But AI can also be used for other things. We use AI for everything. And in fact, I predicted that within about a year, by 2026, about 90% of what we see online will be synthetic. Will be synthetic. And you're already seeing this happen now. We have this term now called AI slop. As you're scrolling through Facebook or Instagram, or please don't be on TikTok, at least not yet, right? Maybe that changes. Wait and see. You're seeing so much of it is just absolutely created by AI. Everything we're reading now is being written by AI. I know I've studied AI in depth. I know the tells for when something's written by AI or when somebody like me actually spends the time to write it, right? And you can see even journalists are using AI. And let's not even get started with our kids and how they're using it and how teachers are getting more and more clever to catch them. I read a chapter called No Blank Pages, and I'm worried that in the future, creativity will be stifled by AI. But we can have fun with AI too. This guy.
Hold on there. I'm the real Eric. Don't listen to this other guy. You think you're listening to Eric O'Neill.
He keeps showing up at my keynotes.
But what if you're not? I look like him. I sound like him. I even move like him. For all you know, I could be the real Eric, and the one standing there is just another fake. That's the trick with AI avatars like that other guy. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to make you doubt what's real. One moment of hesitation, one click, and it's too late. He's not something out of Black Mirror or your favorite sci-fi show. Digital doubles like him are changing the way we connect and see the world. In my new book, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, which I know you're all going to buy, I've predicted that by 2026, 90% of what you see and hear online will be synthetic. That means created by AI. So ask yourself, can you even believe what you see with your own eyes? And can you tell which of us is real?
Now imagine you're on a Zoom conference, and everybody on that Zoom conference is saying exactly what a group of cybercriminals want them to say. And you work for a major multinational corporation and you're in finance. And you think the CFO has just told you to send a wire, in fact, 15 separate wires to 5 different bank accounts in Hong Kong. You've just heard him say it, and you do it to the tune of $25 million. And this is what happened to a company, and it's happening time and time again. So AI is being used to fool everyone from people. You can use an AI avatar like that to make someone fall in love with you and then ask for a ton of money. Finance fraud. You might be talking to your new best AI friend who then says, I've got this great investment for you. And suddenly you've been pig butchered, which means you've given them all your money and then they disappear. It's the old Chinese art of fattening up a pig until it's as big as it can get and then you carve it up. AI is changing the way that we are going to communicate, but also how we're going to perceive. And so we have to be careful now about everything we see that comes across the internet. And these are some of the things that are in Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. I'm looking into the future and trying to protect you against not only the attacks of today, but the attacks of tomorrow. Now, we're not going to leave Robert Hansen sitting in that office, smiling at me, challenging me. We will catch him in the end. And so I thought that in closing, before we go to Q&A, I would tell this story about how I, in my part and my role in this investigation, managed to catch him. So to set up Robert Hansen a little bit, because we're in the Spy Museum, right? So we got to do a little bit of spies. It can't all be cyber criminals, right? And there's a great exhibit here if you get a chance to go see it. I sometimes like to go down there and just stare at it and be happy that he got caught and I survived. But this is this story. Robert Hansen was one of the most damaging spies in U.S. history. I call him the most damaging spy in U.S. history. I'm a little bit biased. He was definitely the most damaging spy in FBI's history. He spied for 22 years of his 25-year career in the FBI. And during that time, he gets some of the worst information to be given to a foreign power. At the very end of his career, months before he was going to retire, a former KGB source gave up some information, a little folder of information. And when a joint task team from the FBI and the CIA flew out to Moscow to meet with him clandestinely, they received an envelope, paid him $14 million for that envelope. And this is the best part. Now, I know some of you out there have kids that are applying to colleges, or you will. It's a miserable experience. This guy knew that. He had 2 college-age kids, and he said, I want witness protection because I don't want Putin feeding me a plutonium muffin for breakfast. And I want the college of my choice for my 2 college-age children, free ride, and I don't even have to apply. And they gave it to him. And that guy is a genius. He's my hero for that. Then he just disappeared. He's gone. And we opened the file, and there is a bunch of letters signed by Ramon Garcia, not Robert Hansen. That was his spy name. A cassette tape and a trash bag. And that's it. And with that, you have to catch a spy. Well, the FBI is good at this. Run the prints on the trash bag, listen to the cassette tape and hear the voice, and hearts sunk in that little room because they realized that it was Robert Hansen, the top analyst against the Soviet Union and then Russia. That's how long he spied. And at one point, the FBI had gone to their top analyst and asked him to put together a list of everyone who could be the legendary spy named Graysuit. Guess who they asked? Robert Hansen. That's right. They asked him to catch himself. And enter me. They decided to give him his dream job, promote him to executive service at the FBI, throw him into a office in FBI headquarters where he had not worked and give him staff, which was me. And they put him in charge of a new section called the Information Assurance Section, which was cybersecurity back then. That's what we called it. Gave him access to data, hoping he would steal it and put it under a footbridge in Vienna, Virginia, and we could catch him red-handed. And the only thing really standing between him and that was me. And I had no idea what I was doing. But I kind of figured it out as I went along. And sometimes you learn as you go. And this was certainly the case for me. Fast forward to the end, because if you want to have the whole story, go get my first book. I'm just telling this story as a bonus to Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. How do you catch a spy? Well, it was difficult, but he had this routine. He had a Palm Pilot. Who here had one? Come on, don't be shy. Yes, a Palm Pilot. For those of you who are not Gen X or older, a Palm Pilot was this clunky machine, and you opened it up, you flipped it open. It was about that thick, and you stabbed it with a stick, and that's how you got the data in. A plastic stick called a stylus, right? It was terrible. But it was basically a digital calendar, and you carried that around instead of just a little calendar, which would have been lighter, and you could write in it with a pen. Probably the same amount of work. But he loved the thing. He said, I wrote the encryption on this myself. And I thought, people encrypt things to protect information. Maybe we need to get this away from him. And here's how I did it. He kept it in his left back pocket. And what he would do, thank you, ChatGPT, for this recreation of Hansen's office, is he would, every time he stood up, he would reach into his back pocket and put it in his bag next to his desk. And when he sat down again and again, he would put it into the bag. And this was a routine. And criminals have routines to protect information they don't want spy hunters to find. So I said, we got to get away from it. I had an assistant director and a section chief that I knew he hated come in unannounced while he was sitting down, challenge him to go shoot in the sub-level shooting range, which we were at 930, so I knew that this was going to be a pretty far way to travel from the 9th floor, and didn't give him a choice. And Hansen was mad because we learned everything in the psych profile I was putting together on Hansen. Doesn't like to be challenged. Doesn't like anyone ahead of him in the chain of command. He was a true narcissist. Really likes to shoot. So he was conflicted, and finally he said, I'm too busy. I don't have time for this. And they said, this wasn't a request. So he's angry. He stands to his feet. He grabs his ear protection, eye protection. He holsters his firearm, and for the first time, he doesn't reach down and grab that Palm Pilot. And I'm very excited. But I wait. And he gets down there, and I get a text from an asset down in the range saying, in-pocket shooting. I go into the bag, and I reach into the pocket. There were actually 4 pockets. ChatGPT couldn't get it right for that bag, but it is an eerie recreation of the office. Had to do it from memory. And I find the Palm Pilot. I find a data card and a floppy disk. I grabbed all 3. I ran down 3 flights of steps, handed it over to a tech team who just starts copying it one to one. They say, it's encrypted. We'll break the encryption later. I said, this is great. Can you just get it done? And as they're doing it, I get another text. Out of pocket, coming to you. So here's what he did. He sent his target down range. He pulled out his firearm. He fired off a clip. He brought the target back, a beautiful little grouping right in the center. The guy was a dead shot, holstered his firearm. I like to think he touched his bottom, realized he didn't have his Palm Pilot, and abruptly left and came back up to the 9th floor, where I wasn't. I was 3 floors down, stressed out. And I'm trying to say, he's on his way back. I need to get there ahead of him. And they were like, don't worry, we're almost done. I said, you don't understand. He's armed and angry. I'm not armed. I'm going to lose this fight. But it wasn't like James Bond or Jack Bauer or Jack Ryan. I'm the spy that starts with E, not J. I was ahead of him maybe by a cool 2 minutes. I saunter into the room. I get to his bag. I kneel down in front of it. And I realize I have 3 devices and there's 4 pockets, and I literally had no clue. I couldn't remember. Because of the stress and the running, I just couldn't remember what device went to what pocket. And so I kneel down in front of the bag, and I'm trying to self-hypnotize. That's what I'm doing right now, because you do weird things when you're stressed. And I hear him coming through the main door. So I just dropped all 3 things. I think I might have made the sign of the cross, said a prayer, ran back to my desk, put the best poker face I've ever had right here. He comes in, glares at me, goes into his office. I hear him slam the door, and then I hear the telltale zip. And in that moment, I thought to myself, why the hell am I still sitting here? I should be running down the hall. I shouldn't be sitting here waiting for him to come out. There's no way I got this right. But these are the moments that we all will face at some point. Now, whether you're trying to catch a spy or whether you're trying to stop a cyber attacker, you have to decide to act. And here, my decision was I had to stay, because if I knew that if I wasn't in that room when he came out, he'd probably go from so far from suspicion to paranoia, he would cut his losses, get on a plane, and he'd probably be roommates with Edward Snowden right now in Moscow drinking vodka and eating caviar. But I stayed, just trying to think, what am I going to say? How am I going to stop this? As I felt the whole room, as I felt that fire burning around me, just like when I was 15. And this time, I really hope that everything didn't get incinerated. He leans over the desk and he looks at me with this angry expression. And he says, "Were you in my office?" Now, when you work undercover, you learn to be cool as a cucumber, because you never know when you're going to go around a corner and you're going to see your target. Everybody who's done Surveillance 101 and the things that we do when you're trying to follow your rabbit know how this feels. And I just looked back at him and I said, "What?" And he said, "Were you in my office?" I said, "Yeah, I put a memo in your inbox. Didn't you see it?" And I had, because you always want to prepare. And he looks at me, and then he looks at me. He leaves for the day. And he says, "I never want you in my office again." Less than a week later, he's on this bridge called Foxstone Park in Vienna, Virginia. That's the exact bridge. That's a FBI asset taking that picture, somebody who used to be on a team with me once upon a time. And he stands on that bridge. It's February. It's 2001. It's really cold. His breath is frosting in front of him. And he smiles to himself, reaches into his sport coat, pulls out a package about that big wrapped in trash bags and packing tape, steps off the bridge, slides it into the superstructure where it won't be seen by dog walkers or kids at play, gets back up on the bridge, knocks the dirt off his shoes, and has just loaded his final drop to the Russians after 22 years. He's about to retire. He's going to get his full FBI pension, and he's already lined up a job at a cybersecurity company. He retraces his steps out of that park where his car is parked, goes to open the door, and two vans screech to a halt. FBI agents jump out, point their guns at him. He drops his keys, raises his hands, and he says, "The guns are not necessary." And then he says, "What took you so long?" He pled guilty, was arrested, obviously, pled guilty, spent the rest of his days in Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado. And we not only know where he would be when he made that final drop, but when, at 7:13 at night, because a Palm Pilot is a digital calendar. And that is how you catch a spy. And with that, we're going to go to Q&A. But I want you to think about these stories and read the book and recognize all the different ways that not just spies, because I think you have to worry about them a little less. Now, I don't know what all you do, but cyber criminals are definitely after every single one of us. And cybercrime has now grown to the third largest economy on earth. Dark web cybercrime right now is about $14 trillion a year. Right now, the US is at 26, China is at 18, and then Germany and Japan together don't even make 14. So by GDP, the dark web, cybercrime, is the third largest economy on earth. By next year, it'll be between 18 and 20, and if China goes down and dark web goes up, it'll be the second. That's what we're up against. But the cool thing is, in the book is everything you need to know to protect yourself from it. So with that, we'll go to Q&A. And if you scan this, you can scan this. I know, I do keynotes all over, and then people come up and say, "You didn't trick me. I didn't scan your QR code." I say, no. This is so you can join my newsletter and get all sorts of goodies and these downloads and my cybersecurity checklist and all that fun stuff. If you don't trust me, though, you can just type in that URL. And if you want a really cool trick for how I make sure that a QR code is safe, because bad guys they print stickers and they put them over menus and they put them on signs and they put them on parking meters just to get you, put your phone on airplane mode, then scan the QR code. You won't actually access it on the internet, but you'll get to see the URL. If it looks like it's weird gobbledygook, it's probably a scam. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda and how we're going to do this Q&A. Anybody in the room, please stand up and ask your question. And all of my friends online, hopefully relaxing in your pajamas with a good drink in hand. Ask your question.
They're typing away. I don't want anyone to be intimidated that I'm standing over here. I've got a lot of questions, but I will defer. We'll take turns. But this is a very important one that I want to ask first, Eric, because this questioner is 10 years old.
All right.
And he wants to know how many criminals you have caught in your career.
Well, now I caught a lot of spies and terrorists, but the total number is kind of classified, right? I talk about the ones I can talk about, but it's in the high dozens. Let's put it that way.
We have, and really, please, I do not want to intimidate anyone from coming over here. I don't bite. We have a question about AI and Hansen. Do you think if you had the skills that we have available now, that there would have been any way to catch him sooner?
Well, there was lots of ways the FBI could have caught him. The problem was they weren't looking. The FBI had its own institutional bias where they simply believed that it had to be the CIA. It couldn't be us. We wear the white hats. And so we were not looking internal. And I love to answer this question, which is a great question, with a question. I know, I can do that. I'm at the podium. When do you guys think, anyone here in the audience, when is the first time, and some of you have clearances, I'm sure, because you're at the Spy Museum, when is the first time that you think that Hansen, who had a top secret SCI and all the other letters behind it, clearance, was polygraphed? Anybody? The first time ever? When he was hired? Every 5 years? The first time he was polygraphed was after his arrest. Well, that's a big mistake right there. Also, he would sit there on our automated case system and just type in his address and all sorts of information to find out if there was an open investigation about him. Yeah, and nobody was auditing. So there's a problem when you're not looking for the bad guy. And in cybersecurity right now, the holy grail is two things: threat hunting and resilience. You got to hunt that threat before it hunts you. You got to catch the bad guy when they land before they do a huge amount of damage. And you need to have the resilience to come right back from it without a lot of pain, because there's no way to keep them 100% out. You just minimize the pain once they get their toe in. That's as far as you want to let them go. Then you cut that sucker right off.
This is a little tall for me. Okay, it works. Question for you. For those of us with elderly parents, I have them on both sides. Both sets of grandparents received calls, fake calls from the grandchildren. Both of them said, they've been in an accident. We need money. The child's in the emergency room. Of course, they call the grandparents, not me. What advice do you have, both for the people in the audience and online? It's not cyber, I understand this, but for elderly, what advice can we give our parents in those situations?
Yes. So what I suggest is a safe word with your family so that you can determine whether it's AI or not. So this scam is growing because it's so successful. I've heard from countless people who have hit by the scam, mom, dad, grandma, I've been in an accident, I hit somebody. This is how it normally goes. I'm in jail, and I need you to pay bail. And then the next person gets on the phone, and it's the defense attorney. And if you don't pay, your daughter, your son, is going to rot in prison for the next week, right? That's one of the ways they go. The other one is a little more nefarious. I've been kidnapped. I'm in trouble. They're going to hurt me. And the next voice says, for example, I tell one of these stories in the book. A woman, a mother in Arizona, who swore in front of Congress that it was her daughter, but it was AI. And the next voice said that if you don't pay, we're going to drug your daughter up and leave her in a ditch in Mexico. And the mother was terrified. Now she had the presence of mind to reach out and have all her friends around her start calling her daughter and husband furiously, and they contacted. And so then she had the peace of mind of knowing that her daughter wasn't kidnapped. So yes, here's what you do. I spent an entire chapter on this in my book. And I'm not just saying get the book, but you give that book to your grandma, and you give that book to your mom, and you give that book to, Or if they'd just like to hear my voice, and if you love my sultry voice, you can get the audiobook. And you can fall asleep to it and then get up and rewind it and listen to it again. That's what I do with all the audiobooks. But it's a growing problem. There are many different ways this attack happens. And the key here is to take a step back, not get fooled by the pressure. These attacks always have a few elements. There's a pressure situation. If you don't do this right away, then all hell will break loose. The sky will fall, right? You get a limited engagement with the person. So, it switches off to another person very quickly. They don't want you to actually get a lot of time to listen to the voice because they don't always use a deepfake. But now it's getting worse because sometimes you get imagine if you get a FaceTime call. The grandma gets a FaceTime call from the granddaughter and just believes it. Right? And you can see how I got suckered by one of these things. So once again, if it can happen to me and it can happen to you, so we all need to just know these attacks, because if you know it, you'll recognize it and you won't get caught by it. And no, all my answers won't be, just go read my book. I have the answers to these things too.
Good talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
So curious, at the very end, you said that's cybercrime, broadly construed, was the third largest economy in the world. And I'm curious, given that this is definitionally a black market, how is that calculated?
Yes, that's right. So the cost of cybercrime that we can tell by looking through blockchain at cryptocurrency, also the cost of breaches, a lot of investigative work with different companies who have lost millions to billions of dollars to the dark web, and understanding how big the dark web is growing. One of the things about the dark web is I do a primer in the book on the dark web, and you actually get to look over my shoulder with a friend of mine who's a dark web spelunker. He goes down to find all the bad things so we can be prepared for them. And looking through some of the most terrible, depraved marketplaces on Earth. It's a system of anonymous servers that are all over the world, some in countries with no extradition, some actually on pirate islands. Some of it is just partitioned from legitimate companies who have no idea that they have been a victim of a cyber attack and part of their computer systems or the networks are being loaned to the dark web. And so by looking at the infrastructure of the dark web, looking at the losses from organizations, and especially looking at the blockchain that we can identify is owned by these different cybercrime syndicates, these large cyber gangs of cyber criminals, we can see the size. And it's growing about 5% per year. So it's already immense, and it's growing like the stock market.
Then if I might ask a follow-up question. So if we look at clear web GDP, it falls off pretty dramatically. United States between $20 and $25 trillion per year. And then like Russia, which is nominally a second or third tier power, is like $1 trillion per year. Mm-hmm. So it's 20-to-1 ratio. Do we have any sense of the distribution? That is to say, are there a few extraordinarily large syndicates and then a long tail of smaller ones? Or is it more normally broadly distributed?
Great question. Yes, there are a number of very large cybercrime syndicates, and the most successful ones run what's called affiliate programs. And so what they do is they have e-learning platforms on the dark web. They have toolkits you can download, and you can become, for example, an ALF5 or Shiny Hunters affiliate. Or there's so many other. And I highlight a number of the different cybercrime gangs in my book. And as an affiliate, they give you all the tools and the knowledge and know-how to start launching ransomware attacks. And every time you lock a target, you kick back 25% up to the cybercrime gang. And they're making a fortune that way just off of affiliates who decide they want to get into the business. There was some calculation done that in some of the former Soviet countries and in all the way in the East and in Russia and different places like that, the starting salary with a computer science degree is around $30,000 if you're lucky. The starting salary as a ransomware affiliate is about $100,000, and that's tax free. Because you're a criminal. You're not telling anybody you just made $100,000. You're just pocketing it. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
What tools can help people be more observant to know what's true or not? 90% is a high number of generated information.
Yeah, that's a good question. So most of knowledge comes from recognizing threats. which is why I spend the entire first part of my book detailing all the different ways that cyber criminals are coming after us using traditional espionage tactics. And that's how I broke it down: deception, impersonation, infiltration, confidence schemes, exploitation, and destruction. And what I do is, because I believe that the way you learn is by hearing stories. So that's why I don't typically use a lot of PowerPoint, even when I'm speaking in front of immense crowds, because by telling stories, you'll remember the story. And so what I do is, in each of those categories, they have a few chapters, I tell stories about how cyber criminals are successful at launching these attacks. So when you can see them, when you can recognize them, you'll recognize it when it's coming after you. And there are a lot of tips and tricks. And then in the second part, I turn it around, and what I call it, think like a spy, act like a spy hunter, in how you can use tactics to defend yourself against these kinds of attacks. Like, for example, in an impersonation scheme, which could be an email pretending it comes from a friend, it could be a social media account, it could be a deepfake like one of my friendly presidents or myself. You need to be able to recognize that it's not true. And one of the big rules there is, if it seems too good to be true, it's probably not true, right? He didn't win the lottery. That Nigerian prince doesn't want to give you his fortune. You went to the bar and you sat down, and that beautiful woman right next to you really doesn't like you that much. If it's too good to be true, it's probably not true. So, prepare for that. And also, the more you learn about this, you develop what I call a cop instinct, that tickle in your stomach that says, this doesn't seem right. Go with that. Right? And when you're dealing with email, I say be an email archaeologist, which means every time you receive a communication online, it might be email, it might be text, it might be social media, because cyber criminals love to attack us now through social media. Start with I don't trust it. Find your way to trust it. Your default is not to trust, and you find your way to trust, as opposed to just blindly clicking through that link or opening that attachment or doing whatever it tells you to do and losing all of your money.
Yeah, one of our guests wondered when you noticed that Hillsong was misspelled in the email address.
Yeah, so I do a LinkedIn Learning where I go deep into that case, where I dissect each of the documents I got and the 100 different ways that I could have figured out it was a scam right away. It was after I realized that I was being scammed, which is embarrassing, but I like to tell that story because I think I need to be humble, and also this perfect way to say, if it can happen to me, it can happen to you, right? What is the easiest thing I could have done? Just call the church right away. I could have just spent $5 on a collect call, or not a collect call, on a long distance call, and save myself, weeks of grief, right? That's why I'm so mad at the cyber attackers.
You were too busy planning your trip to South Africa.
Yes, that's right. I was busy planning my trip to South Africa. I was going to be in Cape Town. I was literally researching Table Rock. I could hike up there, and yeah.
Eric, thanks for coming out tonight. I really appreciate Delete Me here. That's a great service.
100%.
My question is really about since Delete Me's here, is the data brokers. They get so much information from so many places, whether it's your auto body shop, your insurance company, General Motors selling your information to the insurance companies. What do we do? How can we change the laws, change what people's habit? Because I know my biggest habit, and drives my wife crazy, I won't give out my social anywhere. I don't give my social to a doctor's office, nothing. And that's just to try to protect as much and scrub as much off the internet as possible. But I think the biggest thing is, with credit agencies are horrible. And if they have a big data breach, everything's gone. So my question is around the data brokerage.
Well, the problem is that everything's gone. So, there were billions of usernames, passwords, some social security numbers, addresses that were lost by a big background investigation company who was just hoovering it all up. It wasn't even people who were signing up for it. They were hoovering up data wherever they can get it and using it when people went to them to get a background done on somebody. There are more than 3 billion records that are in the latest big data release. Now, a lot of this is just scooped up from many of these different breaches. And every time there's a breach, the data finds its way to the dark web, and then it's for sale. And some of the ways that many of these cyber attacks happen is an enterprising dark web cyber criminal will spend a couple bucks on about 1,000 usernames and passwords and just spend the time to go through them and find that one great account that leads them to a company that they now lock with ransomware. So this stuff is out there. Data brokers are holding it, are using it, and are selling it, and are ransoming it. And then companies like Delete Me, once again, sponsors here, love you guys, can actually go in and buy it away from them, and get it deleted, make it disappear. And that's something that, particularly if you're very concerned, you can do, especially if you've been the victim of identity theft. The other thing that I tell everyone, because social security numbers are so horribly imperfect, I've long since, for the last decade, advocated that we need to get away from the social security number. It's a terrible way to defend our identities. Dave, you might not give it out to anyone, but somebody has it. You got to use it to get a cell phone. And those of all that stuff's been lost too in breaches of all our telecom companies. And it even gets worse. China's been sitting there lurking in all our telecom companies for years now, and the FBI can't even kick them out. So all your data's out there. It's all for ransom. It's all for purchase. So what you have to do is pay attention to your identity. I actually went and I had to get a credit card for one of my companies, and I couldn't get it because I realized I'd frozen all my credit. And so I had to figure out, I had to go find my password to Experian, which I'd completely forgotten, and luckily had written it down physically somewhere so that I could unlock it. But these are the steps we have to take. I subscribe to identity theft monitoring. I suspect that all of you in one shape or another have it free from some breach, because legally, so far what the courts have said is that companies that are breached, it's hard for people to show the nexus between the breach and harm, because I'm getting very lawyerly, sorry if I'm doing too much of that, but the nexus between breach and harm, because it's hard to show that, this company got breached, they had my data, but I lost my identity, and a cyber criminal actually used that breach to steal my identity, right? So how it's come down is give everyone 2 years of identity theft monitoring. And since we continually get breached, I think I got it 6 different ways right now. Just when you get that email saying, I've been breached and we lost your data, we're going to give you free identity theft monitoring. That's good. You want that.
Is there a particular platform that most cyber criminals use for cyber attacks?
Is there a particular platform? Well, here it's more technology. So there are 2 main ways. Well, there are many main ways, but let's just break it down into 2 that cyber criminals are coming after us. The first is using malware, and they will look for vulnerabilities. And here's where we get into patching. Everybody with a phone, right? Please patch your operating systems. When when your vendor said, when your company, you have an iPhone, it's Apple, says, hey, we've got a critical patch, you might want to patch, because usually that means there's a known vulnerability that they've discovered, and it's a way that bad guys can get in. They will look for those. They'll use these spray and pray attacks where it's just a large-scale emails that go out to a big list, just looking for someone who just needed that package and was desperate for it. And, the big, broad email that's written by AI says, we tried to deliver your package and you weren't home. Click here to reschedule, right? That just gets people all the time. The other big way that cyber criminals are now attacking is by using both email or text. Have you ever gotten a text that just says, hey, or I missed you at the barbecue, or some random nonsense like that? That's a phishing expedition. They're trying to see who's polite. And then they will talk to you for weeks and become your new best friend before they completely scam you and then disappear. They'll use what's called dark web call centers, where the email won't say, click here or open this. It'll say, this terrible thing has happened, like your package was destroyed, or, your son is going to lose their scholarship or whatever. And then it says, call this number. And you call the toll-free number, and now you're talking to some dark web cyber criminal who actually speaks very good English, or it's just AI responding from wherever they are in the world, and they can completely school you that way. So a lot of these attacks are using what we call social engineering. It's not a computer attacking a computer. It's a person attacking you through your computer. And since we're all online, we're very vulnerable. Hi there.
Hi. Hi, I'm Jessica from the Delete Me team. So first of all, thank you so much for your talk. It's so informative, and you're a really great storyteller. So it's very
Thank you,
engaging.
Jessica.
Yes. So I was just curious, should you ever pay for ransomware? What are your thoughts on that? Because I see different organizations handling it differently.
So in my book, I have a chapter called Decide, right? My methodology for how you protect yourself is called Paid, because it's easy to remember, right? Oh, by the way, the first part, it's called Diced. And originally I had it deception, I did deception, impersonation, confidence schemes, infiltration, exploitation, and destruction. And it didn't spell diced. And my editor at HarperCollins looked at it and said, if you just move this I, you get a really cool name, right? Because you got paid at the end. Why don't we have diced here? And I was like, you're a great editor. It was worth coming to you just for that, because it just didn't hit my head, right? I just had to move infiltration next to impersonation. Anyway, I'm getting to you. Sometimes I'm too much of a storyteller. Paid is prepare, assess, investigate, and decide. And in decide, I talk about what your decision should be if you suffer a ransomware attack. And the answer, it depends. If you ask the FBI, they'll say, never, no. If you ask some of my very good friends in cybersecurity, they'll say, hey, you should never, ever do it. But sometimes you don't have a choice. And it's because you didn't prepare. It's just because you didn't prepare. It's because you weren't ready. It's because you're just about to lose everything because you have no way to restore, you have no resilience, and you've just lost every last bit of your data. For a person, that might be every photo you ever took of your kids growing up, and you really want that back. Or for a business, it could be a massive amount of pain. That means, for example, I tell the story of Colonial Pipeline, who had to pay because they just couldn't get things up and running, and there was this massive pressure. It was this big world story. But if you do pay, the problem is you still have to do all the miserable work. Paying doesn't mean you're not going to be a repeat customer, because they will come right back next month. So you still have to spend all the time with remediation, restoration, making sure that the attacker is gone and they're never going to get back in. And you've taken every little thing, every backdoor they left behind out before you make sure that you're 100% secure. Because once again, if they hit you once, they're coming back. That's why they're so polite when you pay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, the dark web cybercriminals even have tech support, because a lot of people get locked by ransomware and they have no idea how to use a decryption key. And so the tech support will come on next, and they'll say, so we can help you. We already have control of your computer. We're just going to reach out and decrypt all this for you. That's kind of a bad, because, while they're doing that, they're doing all sorts of other mayhem, but they're very, very polite.
I was delighted to hear about the case, I guess, in England where they backed off because they had stolen children's data. Did you?
Sometimes So the the ransomware group that I was fighting against in the main story, a company that I just called the NGO that I was defending at the time, it's called Lockbit, and I actually was on a call with the attacker and talking to him on a message board, and called him out and said, you have in your terms of service, they have terms of service on their dark web message boards as well, that you never attack charities or hospitals. And what he told me was, but you're an exception because you were helping the Ukrainians, and this is a Russian cybercrime group. It is our patriotic duty to attack you. It was doing humanitarian assistance in Ukraine. I was like, oh, okay. Well, you guys are jerks. And oh, by the way, I have like 10 examples of you hitting hospitals, so you're just a bunch of liars. And at the end, I got to tell them to pound sand, which was a really good feeling.
All right, we're a tiny bit over, but
Okay.
I have to ask you this question that came in. All right, and you're going to say, Amanda, you didn't laugh when you read it. This is so great. Have you ever seen the movie Breach about Robert Hansen? If so, how much of the movie was accurate?
That's a great question. The movie Breach. Yesterday, as I was chatting with Ryan Philippi about, posting something for me for my new book, who plays me in the movie Breach, I was thinking about Breach again. And this was years ago. This is the movie about catching Robert Hansen. This was my first claim to fame. I went from a former FBI ghost who was never in front of a camera, I was always behind it, to suddenly having a movie be made about me that put me out in the limelight in a way that I absolutely wasn't prepared for. But it did launch my public speaking career and opened every possible imaginable door. The movie Breach is a movie made about me. My book, Gray Day, is my story. If you want the true story, you read Gray Day or listen to the audiobook if you like my voice. And then you watch the movie Breach and you'll see where Hollywood changed things. The center core of the movie, however, the two guys in the room and the way I caught Robert Hansen are all very accurate. With the one exception that they had Ryan Phillippe pretending he's Eric O'Neill not run down 3 flights of steps. And I thought that was the craziest part of the whole thing. They just wanted him to go do it quick at his desk. Maybe they needed a little bit more room and they had cut it a little, but it's a great movie. I love the movie. And that movie, there are parts of that movie are taught in every intelligence school in the world. Every time they're teaching about how to catch a trusted insider. So if you're watching that, you're watching it with all AIOs.
All right. Well, Eric, this has been really, really interesting, informative, learned a lot, had a lot of fun. Thank everyone for joining us in person or online. We've got lots of cool programs coming up. Thank you, Eric.